out there, people out there listening, give me a little bit of time. I'll try and respond back, or Will respond back, or Woody will respond. Somebody will respond back. We promise you. It's just been a flood of emails. So I know you can catch Will on his blog, Jevening Research at blogspot.com. You can hit us up on Facebook at facebook.com/Bigfoot Hotspot Radio, or you can email us at bigfoothotspot@gmail.com.
If anybody has an encounter they'd like to talk to one of us about, you can always contact me directly at williamjevening@yahoo.com. That's okay to reach me there.
Yeah, and Will's a good one to talk to. Definitely a good one to talk to. I felt a million times better after our encounter, after talking to you, Will. So I highly recommend talking to Will if you have had an encounter or an experience. And it's kind of nice to get it off your chest. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's one of those cases where I've had a number of people contact me over the years, some very high-profile individuals, both financially and in their professions, who didn't know where else to go to, and they contacted me and asked for their anonymity because of their positions. And I always guarantee that with people, if you don't want your name, location, or anything out there in public, I absolutely guarantee your privacy.
Yeah. No, we won't double-cross you. I know people have sent us pictures, a lot of stuff that I was really shocked by seeing it. But, if we don't have permission to post it, we won't post it. We're not to double-cross anyone. So, yeah, so what I thought we'd do is bring Steed on the show. He contacted the show. He's had a few encounters, and he wanted to share some of his encounters. And one of them that kind of caught my attention, he had told me that he felt like he was being hunted by these creatures. One time he was out hunting, and he just kind of felt like, they were hunting him. Kind of caught my attention. I really wanted to hear his story, and I thought I'd bring him on the show and let him share his encounter with everyone.
Steve, this is Will.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, Will.
Let's start with just a little bit about yourself first, if you don't mind.
Well, myself, I'm 44. I spent most of my life out in the woods hunting and trapping. Grew up on a farm. Pretty much that's it. I was, especially in my early 20s, I was constantly trapping and hunting, coon hunting, predator hunting, deer, you name it, I was doing it. Pretty much got a good knowledge of my local area. I guess there's a guy in the BFRO in this general area that's already been investigating. I read that up on, I don't know if you've heard of that guy in Michigan that's getting vocalizations from the BFRO. He's putting up videos on YouTube, basically the general area.
Okay.
I'm in this central part of Michigan.
I was just trying to get a sense for what part of the country you're in.
Yeah, I'm in central part of the lower peninsula of Michigan.
Okay, so you grew up on a farm and you trapped and hunted. What kind of knowledge did you have about the subject of Bigfoot prior to these events occurring?
Prior to this, my Bigfoot knowledge came off of seeing the Patterson-Gimlin footage off of In Search Of and a few other places, and also Legend of Boggy Creek. And quite frankly, I didn't even have any inkling that Bigfoot existed in this state.
I guess fast forwarding up to the time where this occurred, and was it multiple occurrences? That's my understanding.
Well, I had one sighting, but I've had a few things happen that I really do believe are Bigfoot related now that I've had the time to look the subject over and look back at things.
Go ahead and tell us, what you were doing prior to the event, and then I guess just go in and tell us what happened.
Okay, well, I had gone and laid down in my bed to take a nap that day. It was late in the evening, and I thought I'd just get a quick nap, and I had my bed pushed right up against the outside wall so that the breeze from the window would blow in. It was late summer, and I'd fallen asleep. Ended up around 1 o'clock in the morning. I got woken up. I smelled something. It was kind of like, if you have like a really stinky animal walk by you, how you can catch that whiff and notice it when you're sleeping.
Right.
It kind of just popped my eyes open, and I'm looking straight up, and outside it was a full moon. It was kind of overcast, but what I had seen was filling up almost the entire sky with my view looking up through the window. And it still gives me kind of goosebumps. The first thought that went through my mind is, this has got to be the biggest man that ever lived. And what is he doing looking at me through my window? And he was probably about 3 feet from me. And the only thing between it and me was the screen. I was stunned trying to figure out what it was that I was seeing. It didn't make sense. I was kind of frozen in place. I couldn't really figure out what it was. Probably about 10, 15 seconds of that. He kind of leaned forward a little bit. As soon as he moved, my feet came out from underneath me, and I moved faster than I've ever moved in my life. I leaped out of the bed, and I headed out of the bedroom towards my parents' room where all the weapons were at, and I was about 16 at the time. As soon as I got to my bedroom door, this thing let out a roar that turned into a scream at the end. And I've never heard nothing like it before or since. It just, you could feel your insides shaking from it. It was just like if you were at the zoo and you had a lion roar within a few feet of you. It just shook right through you.
Right.
And
did it wake anybody else in the house up?
Yeah. It probably... My sister's room was next to mine. She had a Great Dane sleeping with her, and they come ramming into me at my mother's room about the time I hit that door. My mother was already up and running. We had a dog chained to the porch out front because we'd had problems with people messing around outside at night. At least we figured it was people. And that dog was going off like crazy, just growling and snarling. And I reached into the drawer because the only gun that we kept loaded all the time was a .44 revolver. And I was going to run out the front door and let the dog loose. I guess I was just on autopilot, just reacting. My mother jumped between me and the door and said, "Don't go out there." And just then, that thing let out another roar just off the edge of the porch. It had gone around the house and was standing right about where I was going to come out. And it let that roar, and it turned right into a scream at the end. And this dog that was not afraid of anything just started whimpering and crying. I was just about ready to do the same myself at that point. That .44 didn't seem like it was big enough to do the job, and I just stood there watching the door, and pretty much I didn't get any sleep.
I can sympathize. Good Lord.
Yeah, it was a long night. We had like a 2-acre section of yard/garden and orchard, and all 4 boundaries of our yard were surrounded by cornfield. The next day I went out there looking for tracks, and in the grass I didn't see anything, but it was pretty hard ground. And I knew that if I got out in the cornfield, if I just kept making bigger circles, sooner or later I was bound to run into tracks. But I got within 6 feet of that corn, and I couldn't make myself go in. I was just afraid I'd run into that. It probably was nowhere around by that time, in being realistic. But the thought of running into that in tight confines, I just didn't want to take the chance. I was spooked the heck right out of me.
Right.
Hey, Steve, when it came up to the house and was looking at you at the window, did you get a chance to look at it, or was it more or less kind of an outline coming up to the house? And how big do you think it was?
I've said before at least 7.5 feet, but, the more I've thought about it and estimated compared to the angle I was looking at it and where it measured on the house, this thing had to have been real close to 8 foot. That was its height. The width of this thing was just massive. I mean, it had to have been at least 3.5 feet wide in the shoulder area. It was just unbelievably big.
It was nighttime, so it was a moonlight. You had a pretty good view of it, or?
Yeah. Let me explain the view I had. It was the moon was probably about 3/4 of the way up in the western part of the sky, kind of backlighting this thing, and I was looking directly at it with the moon overhead of it. and you could count the hairs. I couldn't see any facial or front features, but as far as the outline went, I could see the glistening on a couple of the hairs. The rest of it, it looked almost like it was absorbing light. I mean, it was just so black. I mean, I don't know if that was its real color, but it was just like there was no light there where it stood. It was just huge. You could see you could tell the hair was probably 2-3 inches long over most of the body. The arms were just massive. This thing made Arnold Schwarzenegger look like a skinny little guy. And the chest on this thing, it wasn't like some of these pictures I've seen where people draw them like bodybuilders. This thing was like a barrel. It was just really, really thick.
Very thick, right?
Yeah. When I heard what you guys had seen, it kind of gave me a lot of shivering and shaking. I couldn't imagine being in that situation. I didn't hear anything more of it. I didn't see any more of it. The dog was dead quiet after that. He wouldn't make a sound. I wasn't even sure if he'd made it through the night till I went out the next day. So, yeah, I think it probably left pretty quickly after that.
And was that the only time something like that's ever come up to the house that you know of, I guess?
Well, when we moved in that house, my great-grandmother died, and we bought that from the family, moved in when I was 6. Almost immediately, my little sister, she was about 3 at the time, and she used to come tearing into my room at night or my parents' room, and she was always saying that there was these things she called Foo Bears, and she said they were trying to get her. And everybody just thought, this is just a little kid imagining, but, I mean, she was really terrified. Oh, about the time I turned 9, one night my parents woke me up, and they put me, my sister, and our dog in their bedroom, and my dad handed me a pistol and told me if anything came in that room that wasn't them, to shoot. I didn't know what was going on, and they went outside and searched, and then they came back in after probably a half hour. They kept us in their room for a while and let us go to bed in their room for the night. And later on, my mother told me that something had woke her up, and she had a horrible feeling of dread and ran in my sister's room. She thought there was some problem with her. And the next day, when they went out and looked, underneath my sister's bedroom window, the flower bed had these huge footprints in them. On the aluminum siding, I don't know if you've ever touched aluminum siding and seen how it leaves your oil from your hands.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
They said that there were humongous handprints, like a really big man had been looking in her window.
Jesus.
So I've always wondered if that wasn't related. We had a few weird things happen on that farm over the years, and it didn't happen all at once. It just kind of like every summer you'd have a few oddball things happen. We had chickens, and of course you have chickens. Every predator in the county knows your residence because you're the local supermarket.
That's right.
And we lost a few to about everything, but there was a galvanized steel shed, and we had a latch on it that you had to turn and put a padlock through. And I always would go out and I would leave the padlock unlocked, but just through that hasp to hold it in place. One day my old man he was tearing me a new one. I got up and the chickens were all over the yard and the turkeys were out too. And he said I'd forgot to close the chicken house up because we had a inner door and then a grain room and then the outer door. And I went out there and it was all wide open, just like somebody'd opened it all up and went in. And we had a few chickens missing, but, you didn't know if that was just that they got away or if neighbor dog got them or what. But I knew that I had locked that or closed it up good and latched everything. If I hadn't, I fed them in the mornings, they would have been out by that afternoon, and this was the next day. This happened several times until I got in the habit of locking that padlock, and then it didn't happen anymore. And I always wondered, whatever had opened that had to have fingers and thumb.
Going back to with your sister, God, it reminds me of the cowman story, doesn't it? A little bit, you guys?
It does, very, very. And you know, that's a common thread among this type of encounter.
I read the cowman story.
Oh, you read the cowman story?
Yeah, I heard you guys talk about it, and I read that to see what it was about. It kind of sent chills up the spine. I had that feeling about it.
Let me ask you, Steve. I got two questions. One is, have you ever talked to your dad? Did you ever speak to your dad about things that had happened, you know, after you had kind of grown up? Did you ever go back and talk to your mom or your dad? I know you talked to your mom a little bit, but did you ever talk to your dad about things that were going on?
Well, my dad not really. He's not the kind of person that would deal with that really well. My mother, I've talked to her about it off and on, and she remembers hearing it all right. And she remembers pulling my sister out of the bedroom and putting us in her room that night. And whatever it was, both times had her shaken up, but she never saw anything, but she sure remembers hearing that roar.
Yeah, when your dad goes, "Hey, here's a gun, son. If anything walks through that door, blast it. If it's not us, you know there's trouble."
Yeah, and he made sure to tell us to ask if it was him first.
Yeah, so he knew a lot more than he said.
Yeah, I think he had some suspicions about what it could be. But like I said, off and on over the years, it was like we thought we had somebody messing around out there at night. Weird things would happen, and we just always chalked it up to a prowler until that point when I had that sighting. And then I started wondering what was going on. Kind of turns your view of reality upside down a bit.
It definitely changes it, that's for sure. Because, you know, Wes, Woody, and I have all three seen Sasquatches up close, we know definitely it changes your outlook on the world.
I got two questions for you, Steve. One is, how far was our forested area close by the farm? And then the second question is, what do you think their intention was? What do you think the whole intent was of coming up to the house, kind of messing with your little sister, coming up to your window? What do you think that, looking back, what do you think their intent was?
Well, the first question, the area I live in, there's a lot of lakes and river systems that interconnect and go a good chunk across the state. There's a lot of cedar swamps, and you'll crawl right out of these lowlands and right boundaries all around them. Then you'll have farms, orchards, livestock, and back then even more so. There was a lot more people farming this area then. These areas all kind of interconnect in narrow bands, and that's where I've heard people say, you know, having weird things happen in these same areas where I've run into stuff, and I think it's basically, you know, they had really good travel arrangements for, you know, you had creeks, rivers, and you got all these old railroad grades that have all been abandoned. You even have small gauge, narrow gauge railroad grades from the logging era that are still open. I get on those and I can walk for miles through cedar swamps and across state land and such. Then we have natural gas right-of-ways through here that, you know, you could get in them and just travel long distance. So I think they've got a pretty good area if they wanted to utilize it. As far as the second question, you know, I'm not really sure what they wanted. I always told myself that, you know, we had a lot of fruit trees, a lot of stuff in the garden going on. We had livestock and such. I figured they'd probably just coming up for food. But, you know, this thing, if it really wanted to hurt me, it could have. I mean, the only thing between it and me was about 2-3 feet and a screen on a window. But at the same time, I didn't feel he was friendly in any way, shape, or form. He let me know he was boss. I'm looking in the window, and my mother, she still swears it was a dangerous situation. You know, I wouldn't have been surprised if they wanted to take my little sister for whatever their reasonings, whether it be to maybe they're attracted to kids or maybe they wanted to eat one. You never know.
Well, let me ask you, what gave you the impression that it was, as you described, boss, or a threatening situation? Did it do something, or was it its body posture, or what do you think made you think that?
When I jumped up out of bed, I hadn't made it 10 feet, and this thing let out that roar directed right at me through that window. I ran the fastest I've ever moved in my life. It was probably 25 feet from my bed to the doorway at my mother's room. And just a few seconds passed, and I was going to go out that front door to let the dog loose. This thing was already there waiting for me and roaring again. He knew where I went. I think he had a pretty good idea what I was doing.
Oh, so it ran around the house to the other side to where you were headed. It didn't just stay there. It actually ran around to where. Oh, I gotcha. Wow.
That's the part that really spooked me. Because my bedroom was pointing towards the west. It was at a west window, and it had to run all the way around to the far south end of the house and meet me. And it did it pretty quick.
You know, in terms of primates, anthropologists call that a display, and it often is a threatening or challenging type behavior.
You know, it might have just been bluffing or buffaloing me to keep me in place. Maybe it had its family out in our yard eating apples or something, and was just trying to cover for him. Even I don't know. It definitely didn't seem friendly.
And that's very similar. I don't know if you heard last week's show, but Mike in Oklahoma was talking about when the creatures would come up to his home and look in the windows and race around, from one side of the house to the other, just exactly like what you described.
Yeah, it was like they're playing with you. That they're a step ahead of you on that. These days, I probably wouldn't fall for it as easy, but when you're not expecting something like that, boy, he was a step ahead of me, knew right where to go.
Steve, you said was it like a lion's roar, or was it just like a large growl, or what kind of a noise?
Well,
go ahead.
I'd talked to a guy from BFRO a few years back. He kept having in his head that it made a howl and then a high-pitched sound, like a howler monkey, he kept saying. And this thing, to me, boy, it wasn't the sound of a lion. It had that kind of impact. The sound was actually a bit closer to what you'd hear on movies like Jurassic Park. It was just like I can't even copy it. It's just extremely deep and piercing, and then it went
up to
for a ways and then real high pitch. I mean, at the end, it almost sounded like a wildcat screaming.
I think we have some recordings like that. But, and I probably shouldn't say this, but, a lot of the folks in the BFRO really don't know what they're talking about. So, but yeah, they usually start out very deep, and it'll ramp up to a high-pitched scream.
I got one for you guys. I'll play, I was going to play this later and talk about it. I'll explain the audio file, but let me play this real quick for you, Steve.
That first part was awful close, and then it transitioned into a real high-pitched scream or screech. It's similar to the second part, but even higher pitched than that. Yeah,
those were actually taken from Michigan. That's crazy. I was just kind of curious. I was going to talk about that later in the show, but I wanted to play it to see what you thought.
That first part is as close as I've heard anything to the roar it gave. Almost like an air raid siren for volume.
Yeah, and that's how a lot of people describe it, like a siren. You had mentioned one time that you felt like you were being hunted by them.
That actually was scarier than the sighting. I went out, I was in my early 20s, and there's this one section along the river, and I had another occurrence within a half mile of this place, but I chalked it up to, just nothing, and I get over it and braven up and hunt that area again. And I decided to do some squirrel hunting in this river bottom. I went out there alone. I just took my 22 mag with me and figured I'd go pop a few squirrels for the pot. And I got into the woods there, and as I worked along, I started coming up along this L-shaped ridge. And that chunk of woods it's kind of dark. It's not a cedar swamp, but it's kind of reminds you of that atmosphere for how dark it is. As I got in there, I found this spot on the ridge that looked like a real good place for, ambushing squirrels as they moved along from tree to tree. And I noticed it was just dead quiet. There not even a cricket or a Tweety bird or nothing in there. I felt kind of odd, but I just, chalked it up to jitters and tried to pay no attention. The longer I sat there, the more I kept getting this feeling of being watched. And I would look over the area that I could see, and I'd think every now and then I thought I'd caught a glimpse, but it'd just be a dark shadow, real quick move. And it seemed like I was getting this from two directions. And I never heard nothing, and I never really saw anything solid, but I'd keep catching movement. And I kept getting this feeling worse and worse that I was in danger. The movement I was catching was like it was trying to work around behind me on one side, yet out in front of me on the other. And it may sound crazy, but it was like I had this voice in my head telling me, "Get out, you're being hunted." Not like a literal voice, but, that nagging little feeling you get telling you there's trouble. And it just kept getting worse and worse until at first I was telling myself I was just being afraid of the dark type deal. And finally it was like it was screaming in my head, this is it, get out of here. And I literally backed my way out of that situation for over 300 yards before I would turn my back to it. And then I hobbled my way right out to my truck and got in it, and I have never stepped foot in that section of woods since.
They have a way of surrounding you, and they have a way of I know that voice in your head that's like, get out of here, get out of here, get out of here, It's kind of like that. I think it's that fight or flight feeling that we were talking about last week. I think when you get that, it's good to stop and listen to yourself. You know what I mean? You're probably right on your feelings.
Well,
how far away was the movement from you?
It was under 100 yards when I left. It started out, it was probably 175 yards is the farthest you could catch any kind of movement through the leaves in there. And which made it real good for squirrel because they couldn't see you until they were fairly close. And ground level was fairly open. I kept catching glimpses of movement, and like I said, that feeling kept getting worse, and the movement kept spreading out like it was a tactic like you'd use to divert attention. Like when we were squirrel hunting as kids, one guy would walk around the back side of the tree to scare the squirrel around to the front where the guy had the gun. And that's what I felt like, is like I was getting maneuvered around. Like I said, there was another thing that happened in that area years before that had unnerved a few of us pretty good. It was only a half mile away from there. Some friends and I had decided to go out to this little chunk on the river that was kind of a high sandy bank, and we were going to have a bonfire at night. There was like 7 or 8 of us had all gone out there, and it was pitch black. You could barely see your hand in front of your face. We were up on top of that ridge and trying to find some wood and get a little fire started. A couple of the guys were off to the side, and we could hear something on the other side of the river down in the brush moving around. And there used to be berries down there. I don't know if there still are, but I kept telling them, because they were saying about it, and we saw it's probably just a deer. And they grabbed some rocks that they were found along the edge of the river, and they started throwing them over there. And one of them rocks hit something with a loud, hollow thud. I mean, it just thwack. And that's when all hell broke loose. And something come charging across that river. and up that bank. And it was big, whatever it was. You couldn't see it, but you could hear it. And it was coming up through that river. It was going like that. Everybody scattered. There was this one girl that was about 8 months pregnant was with us, and she was screaming, "Stop, I'm pregnant." Everybody else had left her. A guy named Rich and I grabbed each one of us grabbed one side. We had her lifted off the ground. We ran 200 yards carrying her back to my car.
You can always outrun a pregnant woman.
Yeah. Yep.
Every man for himself.
Whatever it was, it could have definitely had us. It stopped, but when it stopped, must have been right on top of us. And that was only a half mile away from the area where I felt like I was being hunted. So that's pretty spooky area in my book these days.
And that's a pretty aggressive behavior. I mean, whether it's being hit with a rock or not, to come charging across the river and up the hill after you for doing that.
Especially when you have 8 people.
Exactly.
Yeah, you do that to a bear and a barrel gun.
Yeah, barrel.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
You hit it with a rock you throw a rock at a bear and it hits a bear will take off running. I mean, black bear will anyway.
Right. I've run into black bear out here, and usually they don't want no party. They just want to get away.
Yeah, they're pretty spooked by humans mostly.
I don't know if I was hit with a rock, 8 people or not, I'd come charging after you too.
Damn,
my days doing that.
I was going to say, you've had a ton of encounters, and it kind of sounds like, they may have been passing through your property at certain times of the year and showing, I would call it aggressive behavior. I know a lot of flute players out there will think they're just, they're wanting to see the kids and, but it's a lot of animals, they always go after the young and they always go after the old. That's the easy.
Yeah, that's
those are the
easy meal.
Right. But what do you think Sasquatch is? Looking back, I mean, what do you think it is? I mean, it's something I'm always fascinated by the answers.
Well, I've heard a lot of people have a lot of ideas. Some think it's a type of ape. Some think a type of human. And I think it's its own kind of animal. Whatever it is, it's kind of like a platypus. There's a duck bill on it, but I don't think it's any type of duck. I think it's its own type of creature, and it happens to be shaped like us quite a bit. Other than that, boy, I don't know.
People tend to make leaps, in their ideas just based on appearance, and it doesn't. And you're right, it doesn't mean that that's what they are.
Look at a fox and look at a wolf. They're both shaped similar, but
not the same thing at all.
Yeah, right. And these things, from the habits that I've seen, they got different behavior than anything else I've run into.
Right, and it's not friendly.
No. In fact, that area where I had those 2 incidents, there's people around there, they don't like to talk about it, but they actually call it the corn man. They claim, that it hangs around in the cornfields on the outside of that river, and they're kind of spooked about it.
Years ago, before they coined the term Sasquatch or Bigfoot, in local areas, that's exactly what it was. People, just based on what was in the area, they would name whatever creatures were around based on that. So that's very typical of, what we've seen in the history of this.
And I've talked to some of the old timers, and this isn't something that's new. A handful of people will talk to you. When you tell them what you've seen, if they're not picking on you, half the time they're telling you what they saw. I've heard stories going back to the 50s that really, sound similar to some of the things I run into.
Yeah, and most areas are like that. If you can get the locals to talk, you find that those stories go way, way back. Where Wes and Woody live, I worked that area back in the late 80s, early 90s, and found that locals, they were stories all the way back to 1925 in that area. So that's really very true of all these places where legitimate encounters are happening.
these areas around here where this stuff has happened that I've run into, they're all tied in with water. They're all tied in by waterways that interconnect.
Exactly.
I've always figured they got to be traveling by that, or maybe by old railroad grades or whatnot, because they're just not being spotted crossing the road. And all the hunting I've ever done in the winter, I've never seen a track, never once seen a track crossing the road. And I just didn't understand how they could be in so many different areas and you not find a trace of them crossing.
I can get in touch with Steve later and give him some pointers on where to look, because I can, some things I just don't want to put out in public yet. I know how they move and where they move and things like that, so I can show you that privately.
I'd appreciate that.
Not a problem.
The only other question I had for you, Steve, did you, living at that property or being out in that area, have you ever heard any other vocalizations? I know being out and being kind of keen and being somewhat a woodsman, you hear different sounds, so you know the different animals, but have you ever heard any odd sounds while you're out there?
On the farm, I never, once in a while you'd hear a weird howl or yell way off in the distance, but, you couldn't tell was that, the neighbor's cattle off a couple miles out or what, just echoing funny, and wasn't anything you could put a finger on. But I have heard a couple things weird out in the woods since I've been older. I've heard knocks every now and then when I've come through a certain area, and it won't be only just once in a while. You'll hear a knock, and then as you move along, you'll hear another one somewhere off in the distance. But the one that really had me scratching my head and kind of creeped me out was along one of these cedar swamps out back. I was sitting up in a cedar tree, all camoed out. I heard what sounded like a family of people on a leisurely stroll talking to one another. And they were talking like they were separated by a little distance, kind of talking back and forth and just walking along. But you couldn't make out any of the words. And I have never in my life seen anybody else out in that dense cedar swamp walking along, especially a family.
Would you describe
we're
it
talking like over a mile
or like a language?
If you've ever heard people like a family in the park, a distance off to where you couldn't hear the words, it was more like they were talking, but you couldn't tell what they were saying. And it just struck me as funny. I mean, I can't say for sure it wasn't people out there, but I mean, this is an area where if you took one wrong step, you're in marl, you disappear.
Right.
I've heard that catches a lot of people's attention when they hear that. I've actually heard other people say that too, to where you hear, it sounds like your conversation, but you can't quite make out what is being said. I mean, it sounds like people talking, but you can't make out any words. And I think the fact that you picked up on it, I've heard that so many times, I can't tell you that, especially from hunters, to where they thought they heard something. It sounds like people talking, but they can't quite make out what's being said.
Well, if I'd have been on the edge of some field out in a woodlot and heard that, I'd never give it a second thought. But, I used to love hunting the cedar swamps. I'd go out there as deep as I could. I'd climb up in a tree, and I'd just become the tree and just sit there for hours. I couldn't tell you how many thousands of hours I spent in the woods doing that kind of stuff. It was just so odd. It seemed so out of place. I just couldn't put a finger onto what to make of it. I've only seen, the creature once, and I've had these weird run-ins, and I can't prove anything, but this is what my best educated guess is on most of it.
Yeah, no, and I really appreciate you sharing it.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate you guys' show. I mean, I'm hearing a lot of common sense stuff. I've had people tell me, that these things are just, friendly, gentle forest hippies and all this. And I'm not buying it. I feel great for people.
Let's have Wes explain the flute player. He made that comment, so you got to tell everybody what the flute player is, Wes.
Oh, the fun-loving hippie flute player. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, right.
No, I got one question before you go. Based on what you know now, and the things that you have experienced, what advice would you give to people if they run into a Sasquatch?
From what I've dealt with, I'd say just try to, don't run. That'd be the first thing I'd say. I would never run, but I'll back out of there. I'd be careful. I'd watch for signs not to be led into a trap. I don't think that something's going to happen often, but I think it could.
And it does happen occasionally.
I'd just try to, I would just try to real calmly and nonchalantly act like you're not really aware of anything. Just try to move out of there cautiously, not really paying much mind. I think I have a feeling you pay too much attention, you draw people's attention or critters' attention, and it makes them more aggressive.
And Will, I think you probably agree with that. I've heard you say that several times.
Right, and it kind of depends. If it's a direct contact. Well, of course, the first time I ran into two of them, I was just like Steve. I was 15 feet away from two of them. Only I only had a .22 rifle in my hands, and after a short time, I got the hell out of there. But I tell people, if you have that type of encounter, treat it like you would a bear encounter. I think that's probably the best advice I could give anybody. You don't mess with them. Back out of there, get away from them. If it's a peripheral type encounter where there's, like in the situation where you felt like you were being hunted, you can ignore it. Just pretend they're not there and get out of the area. If you pay attention, and he's correct, like with the hunter that I mentioned before in a previous show, who told me he was up deer hunting, saw one of these things, and it kept looking back, and it walked slowly like it wanted him to follow it, which he did. And then after a while, it kept turning back, looking, and he spotted another one up trying to hide behind a log, so he knew he was being led into a trap. Pretend they're not there, pretend you don't see anything, and back away from the area.
You wouldn't shoot and let God figure it out, let God sort it out?
Would I? Well, these days I might,
I wouldn't want to shoot anything unless a situation came up, because from what I can tell, I don't think these things, from what I've seen and known and heard and read, I don't think they're alone. I don't think they travel alone much. And I would not want to press my luck trying to take more than one on. One would be bad enough.
Yeah, you take one out, you're going to have his pals coming around.
No, you're right. I think you're right. I think if you shoot, I think you're in trouble most of the time.
One thing I learned hunting a long time back is, you watch the guys that go in there and they're just trying to stalk every step in there and, be as stealthy like little store-bought camouflage ninjas. And every critter in the forest spots them before they get halfway to their spot, and they're gone. They know the game.
Absolutely.
If you stroll through like nothing's going on and you don't pay attention, you'd be amazed how close you can get to critters and how much they won't pay attention to you. They won't feel you're a threat.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Well, we appreciate it, Steve. We appreciate you coming on very much. I appreciate you sharing your encounter.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be able to talk to people and not worry about, being labeled a town kook and stuff.
No. I mean,
the ones who say things like that have never seen anything, and they have no idea what they're talking about.
Well, hey, I saw it, and I couldn't believe it.
Well,
and for a long time, I still,
None of us could. All of us have grown up not being taught anything about stuff like this. I'd never heard the word Bigfoot or Sasquatch until I, found tracks the first time when I was 14. And the only thing that bothered us about it was we found where they had put some animal intestines in the snow, and it was about 17 degrees, and we saw these tracks, and I said, crap, these tracks the guts aren't frozen yet. Whatever did this is really close by, so we took off running. A friend's dad told us what he knew, and this, there wasn't a whole lot out yet at that time, and then we kind of forgot. A couple of years later, I ran into two of them, so very traumatic. It's a mind-altering, worldview-altering experience.
Yeah, and especially after you have an encounter, you read up on all these other crazy encounters where people have all these crazy interdimensional and all that, and then you feel like, well, I don't really want to come forward with this because I don't really want to be a part of that, because it's not really what I went through. What I went through was
Well, and you just don't know what to expect when that happens either. You don't know what the intentions are, what the ground rules are, or nothing. And that right there is scary enough as it is.
Yeah, because we don't have any reference for that anyway.
Right. And I approach animals the way I approach humans. I've heard one of my pet peeves is people saying, an animal won't attack without any reason. Well,
yeah, they will.
There's people out there that go around killing each other for no reason. And the animals are just the same as people. You got good ones, you got crazy ones, you got some that can have a bad day and snap,
Absolutely.
You just never know.
Even if they're not
That's
fed well that morning, is going to change how their outlook is going to be.
Right. So, yeah, I appreciate talking with you guys. It's been enjoyable.
Yeah, I'm glad.
Well, let's get in touch sometime, and I'll share some information with you. It might help you out a little bit.
Yeah, I'd like that if you could. There's a few
bet.
questions that I have in the back of my mind on stuff like that.
Not a problem. Not a problem.
And thanks for listening, Steve. Appreciate it.
Hey, I look forward to your show every week.
I appreciate that very much.
And we sure do.
All right. Well,
okay,
we'll let
thanks
you go.
a lot, guys.
Oh, you're welcome, Steve. Steve, thanks so much for coming on.
Interesting account. Very believable, very typical of a lot of things I've heard before.
Yeah, it makes you wonder why it was coming up to the window, then to his little sister's window. I mean, that stuff's creepy, I think.
It's like all these stories, like the cowman story and so many others that are very, very similar. I mean, you listen to these and you read these different accounts, and there are particular elements that are almost identical. I almost think it's sort of the beginning. Maybe they have some intention coming up to the house, and as things go along, I mean, for whatever reason, either they keep coming around, like in Mike's case in Oklahoma, and those things escalate, or, maybe because they went out and sort of, stood up to the challenge. The creature challenged them. They kind of, even if just going out there, standing there, is sort of it's not a backing down stance. So maybe that was enough to make the creature go away and not escalate. I mean, who knows?
No, I was going to say, I like the part, too, where it was a legitimate story, and also his opinion about the creature was, he did fear it. It wasn't like he was going to go out and play the flute for it, like Wes was saying earlier. That's pretty typical with a lot of the stories we've been hearing lately, and I think that's pretty accurate assumption of how the creature is and how it reacts. So yeah, I thought it was a really good story.
Yeah, I've never interviewed a witness who felt like, what I thought was a legitimate encounter, said that they felt that there was any form of, friendly environment. It's always been one of, and never even indifference. It was either, of course, shock initially, like all of us have experienced, and then either the creature left, or they left, or it was some form of aggressive kind of thing that has never been.
Well, except for the people that have the gifting bowl and leave the cookies.
Funny, Renee DeHinden sent me on a report one time in the Columbia River Gorge. So I took a few people who were working with me in the field at the time. I went to the house, and the lady of the house, we introduced ourselves, and she started telling us about this encounter they supposedly had the day or two before. They were having a graduation party for her son and a bunch of the kids from the local high school. This is down on the Columbia River. So as she went along, she sat down in this apple tree, and she was describing these footprints. And, of course, the footprints to her were 3 feet long. The toes were basketball size. And she says, if you look up into the sky and, the tracks just appear before you. And apparently I was turning beet red because my friends escorted me away over to the teenagers, and they kept talking to her, and I knew she was a complete nut job. And it was the teenagers who actually had the encounter, and they said several of them had separated from the rest of the party to go and talk quietly at the edge of the light near an orchard. And this thing had approached them, scared the living hell out of them, and had gone on its way down to the river. But so sometimes, there is a kernel of truth in some stories, but, you have to interview the right people in those circumstances.
I know we're almost out of time. I got an encounter for you guys, and I know that both of you have heard it before. It's from Alaska. It's one I wanted to queue up, I think, a few shows ago, and I really didn't get a chance to. And I wanted Steve to take as much time as he wanted to share his encounter with us. I'll go ahead and play this encounter for you guys. and then we'll close it out.
We end up spending a lot of time out in the wilderness.
He hunts nearby Prince of Wales Island. 100,000 acres of dense rainforest.
The island of Prince of Wales is important to me because I've been hunting there all my life with my family, so I know the country. I've been up to the mountaintops and down in the valleys.
With the Alaska winter closing in, Woody takes his last hunting trip of the year to the island.
My sister hunting over on Prince of Wales. We're over there for a week. It was raining and blowing one evening. We're going to camp up on this mountain ridge, but the weather was just too nasty. We couldn't even get a fire going. So we drove down to Eagle's Nest. It was already closed for the winter. There was no one there. We pulled into this campsite. We drove in by the bridge, parked there, and tilted the seats back and tried to sleep the best we could.
Woody settles for the night, but senses that something isn't right.
We couldn't shake this feeling of being watched.
The rain stops. Woody's sixth sense as a hunter is alert.
Just really quiet, too quiet. No animal life, no bird activity.
Woody can't believe what he's seeing.
It grabbed me in the chest, the fear. See something that big, that close. He was powerful. He's big shoulders on him. If he wanted to, I think he could have reached through that window and grabbed us and hurt us severely. But he didn't. It was one of those fight or flight kind of fear. You know, if you can get away, get away. If you can't, then you know you're going to have to fight for your life. That's how bad it was. I sat up, I hollered, I screamed.
The menacing beast disappears. An experienced hunter, Woody knows it's a Sasquatch.
I'm out in the woods so much that I know what I saw. You know, it was mind-changing, changed my life. There's something out there that I don't know what it is. It's not human. It's not an ape.
I was actually going to play that next week, but after hearing Steve's encounter, it had a lot of similarities after hearing him talk and listening to this guy describe his encounter and describe what he saw and kind of the whole experience. You know, that they really should look into that whole fight or flight feeling that people get.
Yeah, it's one of the things I've been working on is, in fact, just recently discussing that with a professional, different psychological aspects and things I'm going to be discussing in the next book. Fight or flight mechanism is a very strong one in us, in most animals actually. We have had contact. Our ancestors, ancient people had a lot of contact with these creatures. I'm sure that a lot of that, when we sense those things, like when Steve mentioned he felt he was being hunted, that I'm sure there's probably some instincts in us from conflicts with these things many, many generations ago that are still very active in us, and these things get triggered when we're out there and encounter these things. Yeah,
I mean, it's just a really unique sense that you feel when it happens to you. And, it's not like a little kid being scared in the night. I mean, it's something to where when it happens, like I was telling Steve, you almost kind of have to stop and listen to that. Listen to that feeling, like when he was out in the woods and he had that feeling like he was just being surrounded. He saw kind of movement. It's just really interesting. It's a real interesting psychological thing that I think should be studied more.
Yeah, and there's a reason that we have that gut reaction. If we listen to that, usually it's correct.
Yeah, I think it's a safety mechanism that's built in us.
Yeah, right.
Animals have it, we have it. I think a lot of times it may save our life, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a lot of the reason we have that. You know, the animals that are usually the most wary and pay attention to that are the ones that live the longest.
That's true.
Well, that's pretty much all I had for you guys. I didn't know how long Steve would go for.
Well, you know, in talking to hunters and loggers over the years, I wanted to make an appeal out there to our listeners who have been loggers or worked with loggers and or hunters. Contact us with their accounts if they have them. We'd like to talk about those with you. And I've known from interviewing hunters and loggers over the years, they are very reticent about talking about their accounts. But we'd sure like to hear from you and discuss your accounts on the air.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Hit us up on Facebook, hit Will up on Yahoo. And I think that's it, fellas. Until next week.
Uh-oh.
Drives me nuts. So, you know, I've been posting our shows to YouTube. There's like these little trolls that go on there, and I swear on every video they put on there, Bigfoot's not real, and then they'll go watch the next one, and then their only response back is Bigfoot's not real. And I was telling Woody, you know, I don't believe in leprechauns, but you don't see me surfing like YouTube looking for leprechaun videos so that I can post on there leprechauns aren't real. Like, you know what I mean? If someone wants to debate it, I'll debate it with them, but...
It's the leprechauns that are putting out posts on those videos.
There you go.
People make a lot of comments when they can be anonymous, you know, and not accountable for the stupid things they say.
It just cracks me up, you know, like, if you don't believe in Bigfoot, why are you searching for Bigfoot videos? Well, let's go ahead and bring Jeff on, hear his story, and then hopefully we'll have time for a second guest.
Okay. Hey, Jeff, you sent me an encounter that you and your wife had.
Yes.
I guess we can start by just asking how long ago that was that occurred.
Okay, this was about a year and a half to 2 years ago. I say that because it wasn't last summer. My son is going to be 2 in April, and she was still pregnant with my son. It was the summer before he was born. So.
Okay, and this was in Pennsylvania, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, well, just tell us, you know, how the day started out, how things progressed.
Okay. Well, as I say, you know, I would go into the forest, you know, and I would look for things that, you know, I thought were, you know, odd or strange or what have you. And I did a little bit of research online, and I found what I thought was a distress signal for what I thought a juvenile Sasquatch would make, and which was me repeatedly banging a stick on a rock. I had a long, thin stick, and I was just kind of clack, 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 you know, clacking on a rock. I'm sorry, let me back up a second. It was about the middle of the afternoon. I'm sorry, this was about the middle of the afternoon, about 1, 2 o'clock. I was in an area in the Michaud Forest of Pennsylvania. I was in an area right near a big water tower. There's, you know, a couple creeks near there, what have you, and I wanted to go out. I had the day off. My wife said, okay, well, I'll go with you. You know, it's not a problem. Well, we decided to go into this one area that's popularly known as White Rock. It's one of these areas that you can go up, and if you climb to the top, you can see a variety of the town and things like this off in the distance. So, well, we didn't climb to the top, but we were around the bottom of this ridge. So I'm, you know, my wife, you know, nature called, so she had to use the bathroom. She was going pee. You know, she probably wouldn't want me saying that, but this is what happened. She was going pee. I was about 10 yards from her, and I'm tapping on this big boulder, you know, pop, 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 doing it pretty fast, repeatedly, or what have you. And all of a sudden, I'd say about 20 yards from me, in the thicket, behind the laurels, behind more boulders, we got these really heavy footsteps. I mean, it sounded like somebody was literally dragging their feet through autumn leaves. I mean, it was just really heavy. You know, and I looked back at her, you know, and my wife's always been, she grew up in the area, so she's always kind of been weird about, you know, other people in the woods and getting scared real easy like that. Well, anyway, so I looked back at her, you know, and I went, oh, do you hear that, you know? and she, her eyes were getting kind of big, and she was starting to kind of rise up, and then all of a sudden I'm sitting there, pop, 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 doing it more, and then from way up on the ridge, the footsteps kept happening, but then from way up on the ridge, we started getting these rock clacks, and they were loud. They were like pow, pow. I don't know if it was two rocks banging together or one rock being smacked on the side of another boulder or what, but it was loud. It was pow, 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 and in my novice mind, I was sitting there thinking, oh, well, maybe it'll communicate with me or maybe it'll mimic me or what have you. This is the mindset I had, so I kept tapping. Tap, 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 tap. Well, when the rock clacks happened, as well as the footsteps, I looked at my wife, and she's like, no, I'm leaving. I'm getting scared. This is weird. And the only way that she would go into the woods with me that day is if she held on to the keys. All right, so me, being a novice, I was really excited trying to process this information. I hadn't ever gotten what I thought was activity like this. Well, she starts going back down the trail to our Pathfinder, and I was like, oh, well, gosh, I guess I have to go now, and well, so we went back down the trail, which really wasn't all that far, maybe 50, 60 yards from where we were, and we got to the mountain road, got in our vehicle, and we must have went like maybe 2 city blocks, which is it drives kind of around the ridge in a circle of where we were. And I'm begging her, listen, let's just stop, let me smoke a cigarette. I just want to process this, And so we got out, and I was smoking a cigarette. She was in the passenger side, had the windows cracked, because I wanted to talk to her as I was smoking a cigarette. And I was standing in front of the vehicle. She's standing there. And then from where the back part of this ridge was, the same ridge we got these clacks, all of a sudden there was this huge roar. And it was a roar. It was, it was so loud. It literally blew through the forest, and I literally felt it blew through me. Now, I didn't see anything, and I haven't ever been one to litter in the forest or anything like that, but honest to God, guys, I flicked that cigarette on the ground, jumped in the truck, and left.
Jesus, how close do you think it was to you, Jeff, when it roared?
Honestly, I think, it was loud. It was loud. It sounded like King Kong was roaring through the forest. It was, like I said, I didn't see anything. I just kind of froze. I was really stunned, I thought, and my wife's eyes got real big too, and well, I'd say, gosh, 80 yards, if I would guess. Now, I've been back into that area before, and there's a huge outcropping of boulders, and I've been back through there before, and looking and listening and things like that, and I honestly, guys, I got so scared, I've been hesitant to make that sound again or to try to do any other, novice would-be, I guess, squatcher stuff. I didn't ever really consider myself a researcher or any of that, but I was really inquisitive about it, but it was close. It was really close. It was real close, close enough to, it was loud. It was loud. I can stand out in the forest, and this is right off the Appalachian Trail here. I can stand in the forest and yell, and, you can get a good echo, but, the forest is so vast, it'll swallow your voice right up. This was loud. I swear, in my mind, as I replay it, and as I've replayed it a million times since that day, I get the feeling that something was up. It was up somewhere. And like I said, I've gone back into that location. There are these big outcroppings of boulders. Huge boulders, and you can climb up. And I've climbed up them before, and you can see the road. I've watched another car drive the road, and you would never know it to be on the road and look back. But it's a good advantage point to see, but that really did. It really scared me, you know. And my wife, actually, I told a few of our friends, you know, and she was my witness. So, you know, I was like, hey, listen, tell them, you know. And then, you know, she gets a little weird about it because she doesn't want them to look at her the way I guess some people are looking at me, like I'm this weirdo, you know. But it really did scare me. I mean, it scared me.
Would you describe it as kind of like an African lion type roar?
Yes. Yes, I would. Yes, I would. See, I thought something might just, you know, look from behind a tree, or at most maybe, you know, a whoop or something like that to try to maybe talk to what they would think a juvenile was, and then really it was just me. I was not prepared for that sequence of activity. I definitely was not prepared for that roar. I mean, it was a roar, a loud one. And I've been by cougars and lions and tigers, and it sounded just like a roar.
Woody and we've heard that before, that roar, and I even made a comment. I was kind of being a smart mouth at the time, but because Woody was asking me what it was, and I said, it sounds like an African lion to me, and that's exactly what it sounds like. You know, when you hear it.
That's exactly right. I mean, it sounds just like that, and when I describe it to people, you know, sometimes, I could tell a million people, but sometimes I tell my friends that are hunters or what have you, I tell them, I'm like, listen, this was a roar. And I don't mean like a grizzly Adams bear or a black bear, like, it was not like that. I mean, this was a loud roar. It was loud.
What were your feelings after that happened? You hear a roar like that, what happened to you? Was there anything substantial as far as how you felt after the roar?
Since that roar, I have, you know, beforehand, I would be able to go into the forest, walk deep into it. I wouldn't care. I'd walk deep back out of it by myself. No gun, nothing. Since that roar, I mean, that roar scared me. I expected the footsteps. I expected the rocks. But since that roar, now, I don't want to sound like this, but honestly, it scared me. It really did scare me. I thought, wait a minute. You know, like I said, I wasn't planning on that. I didn't expect that. I didn't even know that, you know. And so now when I go into the forest, I tend to not really go that far into it. And I mean, maybe I'll go 20 yards, you know, off the road. If I see something that I'm curious about or something like that, then I'll go. But, you know, whereas I used to take every piece of personal time I had, and I would just go disappear into the forest. I don't do that anymore. I have to have somebody with me, and if they don't have a gun, then, you know, our actions are limited. Because, I mean, it was just she and I out there. You know, it was she and I out there, and she was pregnant.
It kind of changed your perception as far as what it's like to be out by yourself in the middle of the woods, in the middle of nowhere, and have something light you up like that, to where you have all these emotions going. Obviously, it's changed your life to some sort.
Oh yeah. No, that's completely accurate. No, that's completely accurate. You know, because like I said, I wasn't ever scared of anything in the forest. You know, I wasn't scared of people. I wasn't scared of animals. I wasn't scared of that. Not because I think I'm all that tough or what have you, but I didn't fear that. I didn't have a fear of that. I felt like, well, I can, you know, get my wits about me and either, you know, take care of myself or take care of it or what have you. I can outsmart it, you know, or I'm a human, you know, whatever. Whatever made that roar, man, that thing was bigger than me. That thing was bigger than me. It was very big. I don't know. Like I say, I didn't have a visual. It was big and it was loud. And since then, I've had friends, you know, that are like, oh yeah, well, you know, my daughter, she watches the TV stuff or whatever, and she wants to go out. And I'm like, well, listen, you know, and they don't take me serious. You know, I'm like, listen, man, you know, that's a nice thought, but it's, you know, you can be putting your daughter in harm's way. I mean, you know, because some of these, you know, these guys, they haven't ever gotten roared at like that. You know, it's all fun and games until that happens to you. I mean, it's real. It's really real.
Now, from the place you first heard the noises up on the hill, and when you left that location, how far was it, do you think, before you stopped again and heard the roar?
Like I say, I think it was about, because I've driven this area many times thinking that very same thing. I'd say 300 yards.
Okay, not too far. And the roar came up from where that observation area was, looking down on the road?
Yes, from the other side.
Okay.
See, I was on one side when the footsteps and the rock clack happened, and so we got in our vehicle, drove around to basically the side or the back side of that same area.
Let me ask you this.
And to get to that area, I mean, it's a huge cliff. I mean, it's a huge ridge.
Right. Now, you sent an email kind of outlining what happened. One of the things I was curious about was towards the end you mentioned that you felt like you were being hunted. What made you think that?
The roar really made me feel uneasy. It really made me feel uneasy, you know, and I felt if I didn't leave, I felt like I was being threatened. I mean, it was the kind of roar like, I'm going to attack you. Not like something's out there. Something's coming, and something is mad. You know, I mean, I really did get scared. You know, I really did.
And with higher primates, that's a display type behavior, and it is a warning.
Well, I certainly took it as that. I mean, it was instinctual inside of me to leave. I mean, I immediately froze and flicked that cigarette, jumped in the truck, and left. And I mean, I left. I went straight home. You know, no driving slow down the road. Oh, what was that? I was scared. You know, and at the time I thought, oh, what? I know about this subject. Oh, yeah, you know. Man, I didn't know anything. Anything.
How much knowledge did you have about the subject prior to that day?
You know, I mean, like a lot of people, born in the 70s, and, you know, I saw the Patterson-Gimlin film, you know, or what have you. I saw my dad pointing to the TV, oh, that's the real thing, you know, and what have you. And he had books on the Minnesota Iceman and John Napier's books. I didn't read any of them at that time, you know, or what have you, but I had seen this kind of stuff, you know, and I kind of grew up with this kind of stuff, Fate magazine and whatever, you know, and so it wasn't until much later to where, you know, I thought that Bigfoot, Sasquatch, you know, I thought that was something out like in the Pacific Northwest or something, like where you guys are. There might be like one or two. I didn't even give the thought of, well, gosh, I guess there must be a breeding population. I didn't even think that far. You know, I didn't even think that far. Well, anyway, I honestly, as weird, you know, as novice as it sounds, I was watching Monster Quest a few years back, 4 years ago or whatever, when these episodes would come on, and, you know, there wasn't ever really anything else on, so I was like, oh, well, let's watch this, you know, and it's not that I really got inquisitive through the shows, but I got inquisitive enough to start looking on YouTube or what have you, just more about the subject. And I started finding these guys on YouTube that would post stuff about what they were calling a stick structure and things like this. Now, I know that can be a weird word, stick structure. It can be kind of, you know, not serious, but I didn't consider a stick structure as in a stick dwelling, as in they literally live under these or stay there for a period of time. I didn't know if, or what it was. It was just so very inquisitive to me, you know, but the thing I picked up on was that there was guys in Minnesota, guys in Wisconsin, guys in Ohio, down south in Louisiana, Texas. They were finding these. And I thought, oh, well, if that's the case, then they should be around here. If they're everywhere, right? So that's what I did. I ended up going into the forest and looking and things like that, and I found a bunch of things that I thought were inquisitive and interesting, and it just kind of rolled from there. You know, I never really found tracks. You know, I wanted to, but it's just been hard to find what I thought would be a track or a trackway or any of this. But, you know, I would try to read up on different sites about the local BFR reports or different Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society reports, and I went to a few conferences and things like that, and honestly, other than I don't know if I'm allowed to give names or anything, but I would order books from people. You know, I'd order them on my Kindle or what have you, and just things that I thought would give me any kind of more information about this, because I thought, like I said, you know, me myself, I didn't want to prove it to science or prove it to anybody. I wanted to know. That was the big thing. I got to say it. I feel like I got the proof. I really do. For me, you know. And that's not the only time I had gotten those footsteps or activity. You know, I didn't ever get the rock clacking or the roar or any other kind of real vocalization as such other than maybe what I thought were owl calls and knocks and things like this. Honestly, though, since I've been listening to your show, you know, I'll go back through the archives of you guys' past shows and things like that, and I've really been thinking, I thought, you know, wow, you know, and there was another guy who'd done I don't know if I could say names, but there was a man who'd done a lot of research in the Patterson-Gimlin film, and I don't know if he's so popular these days, but he had brought up a kind of the same view you guys said. It's like, hey, listen, you know, be careful what you wish for. You may get something that you may not be ready for, and I always kind of had that in the back of my mind, but whatever, you know. And I would go out there and just test out things or look for things, and it was really just a real personal obsession for me, you know. But once I got that activity, that roar, I mean, like I said, I was threatened.
Different when it's personal.
Yes, and it was. I mean, that was directed at me. You know, I mean, it was literally directed at me, my wife, and this was in the middle of the day. I mean, this was 1 in the afternoon, 2 in the afternoon. No, I mean, it was right there, right there. It scared me. It really did scare me, and I can't go back. I mean, it scared me to the point, guys, where I can't go back into that location by myself. Somebody has to be with me.
That's one of the problems. There's so much junk information out there, and people like yourself go searching for answers. They get misinformed because most of these people out there have no idea what they're doing. They have never encountered one.
Right.
And that's why a lot of people really identify with Wes and Woody and myself, because all three of us have seen these creatures up close and have experienced this stuff. You know, what we say is what we've seen and know about, so it's people quickly pick up on that have had experiences. And I always tell people, you know, first and foremost, these are wild creatures. And if you don't have respect for nature, you're headed for trouble.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, as I say, my view of this, honestly, I really kind of reached a stalemate after that. Because as I say, and I guess I should be, but, you know, a little ashamed to say, hey, I was one of these people that, you know, hey, oh, man, I'm going to go out there. And I did. I had a lot of fun, and it was a lot of adventure, and the whole thing until that happened. Once that happened, I was at a stalemate. I'm still obsessed, the whole thing. But I'm not so anxious to just go out there into the forest and start bothering things and poking around and things like that anymore because, honestly, I mean, I'm not trying to boost you guys' show, but, you know, since I listened to Wes and Woody's Encounter, you know, I listened to a lot of the shows that you guys have had, and now I wait weekly to get these shows from you guys, and I'm telling you, the thing about them knocking, you know, you guys had on a show a few weeks back about the Siege of Hanobi, where the gentleman was talking about them knocking, and that's how they're telling each other to get in position. I started thinking about that. My wife and I, as I say, since that has happened, now we try to go into the forest just to enjoy the forest, and I mean to camp or something like that. Well, one time we were out there camping, and I heard these knocks. And it wasn't like several knocks in a row. It wasn't anything like that. It was one knock. Pow. You know, and it would be from different locations. It could be from 50 yards behind us and another 60 yards up in front of us on a hill and things like that. And it's just getting dark, and I'm not still putting it together. I hadn't listened to your guys' show yet, you know, or anything. I hadn't put it together that, hey, you know what, these things might be getting into position. As far as I thought about their knocks, it was, oh, yeah, that's just them saying, oh, hey, I'm over here, and hey, I'm over here. I never put it together.
And let me clarify that. It's something I've been chatting with an anthropologist lately, you know, privately.
Sure.
And something that we've agreed on a lot of things that I found in the field over, the past 4 decades, things that I've developed, about these creatures and their behaviors. And one of the things he told me, and he watches some of these different shows just to kind of see what's going on with the subject. And when we talked about these types of knocks, now, one thing, and this is for our listeners, that in the history of this whole subject, this stuff never existed until very recently. But if they do it, and I'm not saying that they do it, but if they do, like in your case, or, the fellows in Honobia, Oklahoma, he mentioned that some of the higher primates who hunt other animals like chimps and other ones will actually occasionally make noises like that, and it is ambush or hunting situation. It has nothing to do with communicating with other species. It's a communication between each other as they're setting up a position to hunt and kill another animal. So when people out there, if you think you're going to go out and talk to a Sasquatch by banging on a tree, I wouldn't do that. Just on the off chance that that they're around and their intentions aren't good, or you're going to drive one away. If you really want to see one, that's not the way to do it.
Well, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. Like I say, I've started to replay different things that I have thought to be activity, and when I listen to your guys' show and I rethink about these incidences, they make a lot more sense coming from the point of view that I've heard from Sasquatch Chronicles. I mean, it really does, it doesn't, it's not this, let's go out there with the friendly forest giants who, are as an undiscovered people. I really was naive about the whole thing.
And,
I really was.
Yeah, most people, I think it's, and I understand the feeling, wanting to go out. It's exciting, and it is exciting, can be, to go out and look and see what you can find. But I think when somebody who really doesn't, I think somewhere in the back of their mind, maybe they really don't think they're going to see one, but they'd like to. But when they have an encounter like yours or many other people, it's a life-altering experience on how you look at the world. And like you said,
it really is
very reticent about wanting to go back out there again. You're not the same person you were before that experience.
No, and now I don't know that I want to see one. Whereas before I would have given anything to see now. See, since that roar, I equate the encounters with something much different. I relate it as in, okay, we're in trouble. Okay, we could be in trouble. Not, oh, hey, there's one. It's really not like that for me anymore. I'm like I say, I am still fascinated with it, but I just honestly don't know what to do, so I don't do anything but sort of just observe now, because that's the honestly where it left me,
And again, you have to approach it like, if you wanted to go out and look at bear or something like that, you have to approach it like that. It's not, I'm going to go out and, as we call them flute players, go out there and hand them a flower or something. That's that's fantasy.
It really is. I used to go out and leave big. I would take $40, $50, $60 and go to the local supermarkets, buy mackerel and chum and oysters and all these things that I thought that they would be able to find in the forest instead of like sweets and things like this. And I'm literally putting a meal ticket on me.
Usually they won't take things like that in real situations. They might be taking a look at you.
Well, I tell you, honestly, on that note, I since that roar, I've really been thinking about, I'm from Florida. I've lived up here about 8 years, and in Florida, alligators, they have a natural fear of human beings, like a lot of other animals. Well, when you start feeding them and they start to associate you with food, you become food.
Right.
In a lot of cases. So as I say, my whole thought of the friendly forest people is really kind of gone. I'm still fascinated, but it's in a much different way now. Look, these things are wild. and these things can hurt you, you know. And
there's a lot of these people that put, like I said, misinformation out. I get emails once in a while where somebody will say, well, take a look at what this person said. And there's a handful of them that will put out this stuff, and they'll say, well, look, all the Native American tribes say that they're like a big brother, and they view them like a protecting spirit. That's not true. There's only a few that are like that. The majority of them, they're considered evil spirits, that they're cannibals. It's very violent. So
it's a very
people
scary
have sugar-coated this stuff and try to make it like, I think they watched Terry and the Hendersons one too many times or something, because that's the outlook, and that's a false outlook.
It really is. And honestly, not necessarily Harry and the Hendersons, but honestly kind of like that. I thought these things were a real docile, type of very shy, which they may be shy, but
they try to paint them like gorillas, the gentle giant. And even gorillas, if you don't approach them in the right way, you're going to get tore up. They will, you approach a group, you're a threat. You watch these, shows on gorillas, and it takes them quite a long time, weeks sometimes, to get the group familiar enough with you, day after day coming there and being in a submissive mode and all that before, the dominant male will allow them to approach. And these things instinctually don't like human contact. That's probably from a very violent past, because the two things that make us the dominant species on the planet, one is intelligence, but we also forget the other one that's just as important, and that's the fact that we are very aggressive and a violent species ourselves, and we're pack hunters. So it doesn't matter how big something is or was in the past, our species dominated because we're cooperative and we're violent. These things, I'm sure we had, and there's plenty of history to show that we've had very violent encounters with these things or histories with them. And I'm sure instinctually that persists even today with them and us when we, you hear the roar or have an encounter, immediately you need to get the heck out of there.
Oh,
that comes from someplace deep inside of us, and it has to be a leftover instinct.
Well, I agree, because that day when I got that roar, like I said, I froze for a minute, and I didn't look at my wife at first. I looked in the direction. I just kind of froze for like 2 or 3
Woody
seconds.
did too in their encounter. That was the first thing they did. They just kind of froze.
Yeah, I don't know what I would have done if I'd have been Woody and Wes, out there. And
it's funny we even get that question. In fact, I even had that question presented to me today. I was kind of recapping on what happened to Wes and I, and one of the first things, one of the questions that was asked was, how come you didn't just drive off? Well, I couldn't just drive off.
You freeze up.
I wasn't ready. I was freaked out. It's funny when people say that. They just think that, you're some superhero and you can just do anything you want at any given time. But as humans, that's not the case.
Yeah, right. I'm telling you, man, when you're in that situation, guys, before I would have went out there and I would have camped by myself, no firearms, nothing. Now, I will not do it. I will not do it.
I stood in front of 2 of these things when I was 16 years old, about 15 feet away from them. Ever since then, I used to go hunting alone, because I figured I had my rifle, I had my revolver, I figured I was impervious. But after standing in front of 2 of these things, no. There isn't any way. I never go alone anywhere.
I'm telling you. It literally has affected my whole,
it does.
I don't want to say it ruined my view of the woods, but I don't feel safe by myself. And like you say, I'm not scared of people out there in the woods. I'm not scared of other animals. What I'm scared of is a Sasquatch, and I really mean that. I really mean that. I don't go out at night in the forest. I won't go, and I guess I'll have to throw my $300 night vision, thing away because I'll never use it, It's much different. It's much different now, It really is.
And really a lot of people want to run around the woods at night, and these things feed predominantly at night, usually plus or minus an hour around dusk, and the same thing in the morning, plus or minus an hour of daybreak. And I always tell people to stay the hell out of their feeding areas because you don't know what's going to happen. Not necessarily they're after a person, but, again, any wild creature that's in the middle of feeding, is probably not a good thing to be messing around with, whether you're out there, you see it or not. You wouldn't go out after a grizzly bear at night if they were out feeding at that time.
Well, and you know what? That's what I wasn't using. I mean, I was completely in this other world with Bigfoot, what we call Bigfoot, I was just so obsessed with just interacting with the forest and trying to get interaction with them that once I got it, man, it was not what I thought. It was not what I thought.
It wasn't hugs and kisses?
No, man. What roared at me probably could have ripped my legs off. I'm serious. I mean, my wife was there. I mean, she's upstairs. I'll wake her up if you want to talk to her. Seriously. I told her, I said, look, they may want to, confirm all this with you. You better get on the phone, and I didn't prep her or anything like that, but it's like, look, you are my one witness, and if ever there is a time to say, all right, yep, this really did happen, you better get on the phone and say it. Because, I mean, it
We'll save your marriage and let your wife sleep.
Oh, yeah, that would be good, because that would be good, yeah. But no, honestly, she herself was very scared by that. In fact, on the way home, like I said, my mind was racing so fast about what all just happened and trying to deal with the fear of what just happened. I was like, what do you think? What do you think? And, and she's like, you know what? It really happened just like you said, just as excluding that roar. She's like, the footsteps, the knocking, it's the same thing you've been talking about, that you've been reading or hearing about or what have you. But, man, and the thing is, I don't know if those footsteps were going away from us. I don't think that they may have been coming towards us, but I think that there was definitely two, because one was on the ground walking, one was up on the ridge banging. I think there may have been a third, or the one that was up on the ridge possibly could have followed us, not necessarily ran after us as far as chasing our car or what have you, but watching that ridge line or what have you, and saw that we stopped.
When they're feeding, one that usually watches over the other ones, kind of a guard. The one that was up on the ridge was probably the sentry of that group.
The only thing worse than getting the vocalizations is when you come face to face with them and you realize, wow, he could use me as a mop to
exactly.
mop his nest over there. That's probably the next step up of shock. But I think the vocalizations you got are pretty... I've heard it before. I've heard the lions roar before, trust me. And Woody's heard it. There's no known animal out there right now that makes that, unless we're in Africa. But yeah. I know that the bass and the sound and just the power that comes out as it travels through the forest, like when it hits you, that's enough to make you want to go away.
Yeah.
And you know what, Wes, and you know what, you kind of hit the nail on the head. I've been waiting to try to say something about that. Was with Jeff's encounter, it's not so much he saw this, he saw that, and this happened, and this happened. The roar was enough to make him frightened for his life.
Leave.
Yeah, leave. And he was, you can tell in Jeff's voice that he was scared, and he had enough. Another thing is, too, it kind of makes me go back with, Wes and Will. It makes me think that that's why we started this whole show, to help educate people as far as these things aren't the friendly creatures out in the woods. There's a reason why we're scared, and it's kind of built into us. And I'm glad we've done it. And I'm going to tell you, Jeff, Will is one of the best guys to talk to about this sort of thing, because when this happened to Wes and I, Wes talked to Will, and he's one of the very first people that we reached out to. If you have any questions, and you don't feel stupid, don't feel like, hey, I'm a dumbass or anything like that, ask Will. he will give you a legitimate answer for just about any question that you have. I appreciate your enthusiasm so too, because you gave us some good props as far as how the show goes. But that's why we started the whole show. That's why we started the show, is for people like you to be able to come out, tell your story, and not get a bunch of BS back in return. That's why we started this whole show, and I'm glad everything's working out the way it is, and I really appreciate your encounter.
Well, I tell you what, I hope you guys get other guys that come forward and say, hey, listen, I wasn't just a hunter. I wasn't just this. Listen, I was one of these guys. I got interested. I went out there, and I got way more than I thought I was going to get, And like I say, I mean, I wish I had more. I'm glad I don't have more to tell you, but I wish I had more to tell you. Oh, yeah, that thing chased me or what. None of that happened. As soon as that roar happened, I mean, it was done. It was done.
Yeah, we're
about as close as I get to him now is a drawing,
Oh, I was just saying that we are getting more and more people starting to come forward. And I wanted to tell listeners that, again, we always say that if you don't want name or location or any of that given out publicly, if you want to maintain your anonymity, we always guarantee that. But, you're more than welcome to get in touch with us and we can discuss what happened. It's kind of a relief to get it off your chest. And we've talked to people that haven't told their stories for decades.
You know what? I tell you, I have told a few people, and I mean a few, like maybe just a bit more than a few, like 4 or 5. But I mean, they're very close with me, But it's not something I tell my father-in-law. I don't want to feel like I don't know, But telling you guys is much different than telling, because I can't go over it with my wife. She doesn't like that experience. It was a bad experience. She asked me actually, why are you talking about this again? Why are you talking about it? And I don't think it's because I had proper closure with it,
Right.
But talking to you guys about it, when you guys are coming from the point of view of, look, it's for real, man, and you need to watch out. That's the main message right there. Right
and
there.
It makes a difference talking to people that have had a similar experience to yourself. Because you can talk to all these people out there that think they're experts, but they've never seen one. They can't relate to it. You have to have seen or been close to one of these things to be able to relate to somebody else that has also. Because if they haven't had that experience, they have no idea what they're talking about.
No.
When you try and share your encounter with, a family member or someone that you love, and then you kind of get a condescending remark back from them. I mean, I can't imagine anything more that hurts, beyond that. Or
you feel like they're just listening because they like you. They're not taking it as serious as it is. They're just listening to you because you have an interest or something like that. And it's like, listen, man, this really happened. Do you understand? And it's dangerous.
Let me throw this at you guys, too. Something that I've realized just of recently is the more open I am about it and the more that I talk about it to certain different sorts of people, they, too, have certain things to say about it. But they won't come out openly and say it unless you already kind of, like, break the ice type thing. And they're like, oh, well, by the way, this had happened. So it's becoming an easier thing to talk about, and I think that's important too. That people need to come out and speak their mind, because I really don't give a crap anymore what people think. I saw what I saw, and it is what it is. If you don't like it, you can either change the station, not listen to me, or you can listen to what I have to say. So
right. But you know what? That's what kept me listening to you guys, though, is because
change the station. Let's not go that far, guy.
Yeah, come on. No, but seriously, that's what got me listening to you guys. That's what got me listening to you guys is the point of view you were coming across. Like, listen, it's, I'm sorry, I just can't say it enough. I mean, it's for real. It really is for real. And I just wanted proof for myself. Like I said, I wasn't interested in, getting the specimen or any of this other stuff. I wasn't interested in that. I was interested in making a few friends in the community and going out and experiencing and at best case scenario, what do you know? I have a secret friendship with the Friendly Forest people that no one knows about. That would have thrilled me to no end. But you know what? It doesn't seem like they want that friendship. It doesn't seem like they want that.
What do you think it'll take to prove Sasquatch is real? What do you think it's going to take?
Well, honestly, you're talking about to people at large, as in to the world or to the country or something like that?
Oh, to the United States.
Okay, to the United States. Honestly, I think it takes a body. I mean, it takes a body. What else could it take? I mean, people have had all kinds of footage and things like that, and a lot of it could be here or there or what have you, and do you trust the source that's showing it or whatever? But, honestly, until either the government says, hey, forget about science, it is real. It is real. Until they do something like that and put up things like don't feed the Sasquatch or don't do, unless they put out, informational posters in the parks and things like that. And until there's wide recognition about it, by other people that are bigger than just your general public, i.e. the government or people that work for the Park and Recreations or DCNR or Fish and Game or I don't know, man. I mean, not to get in this, I know we don't like to cross-pollinate, but, there's fighter pilots and ex-politicians that say, hey, listen, half the world believes in UFOs, too. We've seen them, but, you tell somebody you got taken by one and, whoa, come on, what are you, crazy?
Right.
So
right.
I don't know, man. I would think if you had a body, I don't know that I would, put it in a box and parade it around as such, but, at the same time...
We won't name that person.
Yeah, no, like I said, But, at the same time, if people bigger than us in our government, and I don't necessarily, mean like the CIA or FBI, though they probably know about it, I don't know, guys. I mean, honestly, it would have to be people in our own local governments everywhere in every state, and say, hey, listen, in this part of the country, you need to be aware of this. You need to understand that this could be a theoretical danger. It's,
you hit it on the head. Every kind of information has been out there, photographs, things like that, and people just aren't going to buy it until. And this was, the original people that I knew, Renee DeHinden, John Green, people like that. They said it. I asked Renee, I said, well, why didn't you guys go back and do more at Bluff Creek after Patterson got the film? He says, we thought we had the proof. Well, it didn't go over. I mean, so there's a certain number of people that do believe it and everything, but it's just not an overwhelming piece of evidence. And they knew back then, you have to have a piece of one or a whole body, otherwise it's not going to be widely accepted.
You know what, too, Will, on your website or on your blog site, whatever that is, that Will Jeving Bigfoot Researcher, I actually went there and I played a few pieces of footage with Renee DeHinden speaking, and there was another one with John Green and Renee and another gentleman, and they were all kind of, collectively talking, and I mean, like you say, these guys, I mean, they knew about this, they were into it, they went out there, they experienced it, they were a part of it, and they knew at that time.
Yeah,
they knew at that time. The
minds.
only way you're going to do this is to get one, and I know that's not popular.
They weren't stupid people, and I know that might be, and to be honest, I don't think it's as unpopular an idea as we all think it is. I think there's a vocal minority that doesn't like it, and they're constantly, pushing their way of thinking out there. But when it comes down to it, and we've got a lot of responses that agree with what this thinking is. You want to get right down to brass tacks, you're going to have a piece of one. Now, that's whether it's a tooth or a whole body. that's the only way it's going to be proven 100%.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But as one of your guests had related to you on one of your episodes, I mean, he watched the thing die, supposedly, and you know what? That thing came and got it. And that's not the only case I've heard like that. You know, there have been other hunters or people out there in the field where they were looking for perhaps where a buck was crossing or what have you, and then, oh, whoa, all of a sudden, what's that thing? And thank gosh I have my rifle, and they shoot the thing, you know, coup de rah, you know, whatever, right through the head, and lo and behold, here's another one. What's it do? Do exactly what that gentleman said. It threw it over its shoulder, scaled a wall, and was gone. But, you know, honestly, though, there's a documentary and a book that you guys have been sharing and promoting lately that has a lot of good information in it, too. And it's, if they take these bodies, are they necessarily burying them, or are they eating them, or what are they doing, you know, with it?
I have some, my thoughts are that they may possibly be burying them. I have a number, about 8 or 10 sites right now located that I didn't think at the time when I was there, something that Renee put me onto to document that he found. And I didn't think anything of it at the time. I didn't really know what to think. I figured he was, you know, kind of honchoing that whole thing. But now, after talking to other people and gathering some different ideas over time, I think if I go back, I may be able to at least find some teeth. And it's very likely that that's what these things are doing, and we're learning about other new sites throughout the Northwest. So if this idea bears out, then we may, you know, finish this, you know, as far as the amateurs go, and then turn it over to science. If we find teeth, it'll be a done deal. You know, it won't be any of this. You know, and a lot of these things like DNA and all this other dermal ridges and all this other junk is fine and dandy, but that's all a sideshow. It's kind of a misdirection. You know, they're trying to prove something about really there's not enough substance to those things. Even collectively, there's not enough. It's the same thing, you know, as the Patterson film. Good film, you know, as long as one person doesn't believe it, then the majority of people say, well, they're on the fence and they're going to stay on the fence. But you bring in a tooth, and there are whole species in the fossil record that are represented by nothing more than a single tooth. So
I'm scared to go look around the creek beds for tracks. You know, there might be one over there or something, you know. It's
contact me by email, and I'll send you some pictures of things to look for.
You know, I was hoping that you would say that. I know that you've offered that to other guests and things like that. I really would enjoy that, Will, honestly. I really would. That would be really fantastic. Man, guys, I really thank you for letting me come on here and converse with you guys and express this. You know, I can't tell you what it's done for me, you know, not just to talk to them about this, but to seriously just talk about the subject and kind of where I was with it. You know, I mean, and just realize, honestly, what more of the real meat and potatoes of the subject is. You know, it kind of helps me find my place, you know, as an observer, you know, and that's okay, you know. It's like, and that's before I didn't think that was okay. I thought I had to go out there and have this quest, you know, and it's like,
yeah, man, we have that with a lot of folks now. You know, we get rid of all the junk, talk about what's real, and people are really saying, oh, you know, that makes a lot of sense. Well, it does make sense because that's the reality of the subject.
Your show, I'm sorry, guys, I think that your show is satisfying an appetite of information versus, you know, being able to listen to it, imagine, digest it, consume it, versus going out there and kind of hip shooting the situation, you know.
Do you think that when you were tapping on and I know we have another caller waiting, but Jeff, do you think when you were tapping on the rocks or on the tree stumps and you were getting the rock clacking back and then you had stopped and it had stopped, do you think maybe it followed you for a little distance and then realized that what the things that you were doing wasn't really what it thought it was responding to, and it kind of pissed it off?
I think so. I don't know that I fooled it as such, but something was making noise in the forest that wasn't usual human noise. Usual human noise. You might be out there, tapping a stake or whatever. But what I was doing was, I had a stick about 3 to 4 feet long, pop, 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 popping it on a boulder, rep it really fast. I really did. I've heard that before about them having short tempers on you guys' show. And you know what? That made a lot of sense to me as I reflect back on it since I listened to the show. Honestly, I think that's what happened. I think it definitely was mad at me. It definitely was mad at me, and I think it got mad at me for a few different reasons because, when I've gotten those footsteps before, when I've done that, in different parts of the Appalachian Trail or different parts of the Michaux Forest, I've gotten that. There's these heavy footsteps, but it was almost like something was walking away from me, like, oh, man, this is going on, and it walks off. And I thought back, well, could it be somebody? Could it be someone? And, honestly, with the mountain folk that are around here, a hunter or somebody else would have said, hey, shut the hell up, or something like that. Is that you're scaring the fish, or something like that, versus, just quietly walking off. So when I got those footsteps, I thought, oh, okay, the footsteps. Well, why is it walking away? And then all of a sudden those rock clacks started happening. And I don't mean to repeat myself, but as I thought, oh, it must think that it's communicating. So I'm trying to get it. It had no interest in mimicking what I was doing. That's not what it was doing. It sounded more like an alarm. It sounded more like I don't know, like an alarm, like something's wrong or something's going on that they need to be aware of, or something like that. Like I said, it probably all happened in a matter of maybe 5 minutes. Maybe 5 minutes. It all happened so fast. I say, in my memory, just talking about it, I might say, oh yeah, in about 10 minutes, But it was either 5 minutes or less, because she was up. She had her shorts zipped up, and she was like, come on, let's go now. And these rock clacks were still going on. The footsteps were still going on. And it wasn't like, oh, I think I can hear those rocks. Can you hear that? It was loud. Pow, pow. And it was way up on the ridge. Way up. But it seemed like it was just at the ridge line, like it could see us, I would imagine. And yes, I do think it followed me. I'm sorry, I guess I didn't answer your question. But yeah, I do think that it followed us. I don't know. I think it watched us from those outcropping of boulders and perhaps ran down a little bit and then roared from the ground. Because it is a slight decline as you walk from the road where I was parked smoking a cigarette back to where this roar came from. It's a slight decline as it goes up to the boulders.
I have a question for you, too. And Wes and I have talked a little about this, and I've talked a little bit about it, too. I realize it was a very scary encounter for you as far as hearing the roar and whatnot. But going backwards in time, do you think that are you glad that you had the encounter, or do you wish it would have never happened? Did it kind of open your eyes as far as what's out there? What are your feelings on that?
I have mixed emotions about it. I'm more glad that it happened. At first, I was not glad because I didn't know what to do now. All of a sudden, my Sasquatch adventure was over. It was over. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to deal with that. If this is the one thing I knew to do versus all the other stuff that would elicit some sort of activity, I thought. And when I got that type of activity, replay it, and I think, well, gosh, I got a big fail on that because I didn't get what I wanted. Well, I got what I wanted. Are they real? Are they there? Well, yeah, they're there. Yeah, they're there. So, yes, I got that. And
I get it. I get what you're saying, because it was kind of like me. For many years I thought, no way in hell, this thing doesn't exist. But then when it happened, I was scared to death. But within a few days, it kind of opened the door for me, and I was like, I need more answers. I need more answers now. Who do I talk to? What can I find out? What can I find out about it? What actually happened? Why am I feeling the way that I feel? And I was just kind of curious if you have the same reception on that as far as, your encounter.
I really think so, because I feel like all of the outlets that I once felt like I got tons of valuable information are now, I feel like it's null and void. All this habituating stuff and all that, it's like, hey, listen, man, I guess you need another show to talk about that, but it's really not a good idea. If perhaps if you're Will Jeving, you might know how to deal with this type of situation and have the brains not to create a situation like that.
We all can't be Will.
Not at your home. Hey, let's go out 100 yards into our wood line, and hey, let's bring them to our house where our children sleep. Maybe that's not a good idea. But most of the people out there, I'm sorry?
I said he's got balls of steel. We all don't have that, so.
Well, my God, what's he got? 40 years behind him, and I'm sorry to say it, but my gosh, he knew all those hardcore, original guys, that. My God, they're the ones that spent the most time in the field, and knew about this subject and knew about others that had a lot of dedication with it. And then you got somebody like Will Jeving, and in my field, in tattooing, I'll just put it out there, it's like saying, old school names, that were part of the original foundation and creation of what I do. I'm not trying to put it out there like I'm a starstruck guy or anything, but hey, it's a big deal, man. It's a big deal. I'm talking to Will Jeving here, okay? Who the hell am I? I'm some guy in the Appalachian Forest here, I'm getting to talk to a serious, input about Bigfooting. Let's get real.
Don't forget Wes. He's pretty good too.
That's right. We can't forget Wes.
Well, I forget who's the younger, either Woody or Wes, But I appreciate when the older brother gets on there and he's like, don't forget, Woody, when we were doing this, I just think it's funny. It's almost like the voice of reason there coming out, not to keep going. I know you guys got more of the show to do, but, am I glad it happened? I got to say yes. For all of the things that it stopped for me and all of the regrouping and the reclassification of thinking about it, I can't say that it's been easy or fun, reclassifying all of this, because like I said, my personal passion of quest and adventure in that type of understanding, it stopped. For a moment, it seemed like for about 4 or 5 years, I felt like I felt life again. I could go out into the forest and there was this new adventure and there's this, how could you pay attention to real life? How could you, and when this is here, but
it makes you reevaluate a lot of things, I guess is a good way to put it.
Yeah, honestly, it made me refine the value of normal life. It really did. There's something to be said for it. But hey, anyway, I know you guys got another caller and stuff, so I don't want to, occupy the time. I'll talk as long as you guys keep me on here, but I know you guys got other things to do, so.
No, we sure appreciate you coming on,
and telling us your encounter.
Man, I really appreciate you guys letting me. I really honestly do. When you guys extended that invitation to me, I thought, oh man, thank God, finally. Finally, I can really talk about this.
Yeah, I'll send you some
that
stuff
would be
for you
awesome.
to check out in that area, and let me know what you see.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Not a problem at all. Yeah, so I'll be looking up your email, Will, and Wes, Woody, and Will. Thanks for the show, and really, please keep it going, because people like me, we're listening. Honestly, man, I love it. I love the show. So, Please keep it going. And honestly, I just got to say this before we go. I guess you guys were doing the show for a while and then maybe took a slight break or something there in between and then came back with more episodes, with newer episodes or something. I first saw, you know, Sasquatch Chronicles or what have you, and I saw a picture of Wes and Woody, with the sunglasses and the shaved heads and stuff. And I was like, at first, I got to be honest, when I saw that, I was like, wait a minute, what is this? Oh, God, is this somebody trying to be cool with it? I'm not interested in that. I want the real stuff, you know. And, hey, man, lo and behold, here I am, you know, calling in. No, it's a great show. It's a great show.
Yeah. We're just a bunch of hillbillies.
Well, the nice thing is you guys are normal guys. You know, you look like, you know, you're very relatable. You know, it's easy to relate to, at least you visually, you know, in your pictures. You know, you're not like you know, you don't got the safari hat, you know, and the and the guide jacket, you know, and you're ready, you know, or whatever. Not that there's anything wrong with that, you know, you don't typically look like the would-be squatcher, you know, with the latest, you know, line of bullshit, you know.
Right.
You know.
I was going to say, then we got Will. He's better looking than both of us put together, so, you know. It's
yeah,
good
well,
combo.
That's not hard to do.
Yeah, I'm just old, that's all.
Come on, Will, you got the experience and all the time and all of, you know, it doesn't matter what you look like, you got the experience, you know.
That's right, dang it. That's right.
You know, I mean, hey. You know, you just start spouting off some of your history, you know, and people just, you know, kind of shut the hell up and start listening, you know. So it's been awesome, man. Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you guys ever do any? Yeah, no sweat. Do you guys ever get around? I mean, I know that. I don't know. It might be getting in the circuit a bit of the side shows and stuff. But do you guys ever consider going to any conferences or conventions or anything like that? Or?
Well, you know, we probably would and will once we get sponsors. So that's a hint to anybody out there that wants to sponsor the show.
Right.
I'm going to give us a shameless plug there. You know, it would be nice if we had a little bit of funding to be able to get out and on site and visit with folks around the country and a little more field time and bring, you know, more firsthand things and more witnesses onto the show to talk to folks, you know. And
I'll tell you what, man, don't lose the feel because, you know, you guys relating to the everyday American that, you know, really is interested or really does have a situation that, you know, they're really perplexed with, you know, this is a great outlet. You know, it's a great outlet. And I'm sure you guys will get a lot more, a lot of supporters, anyway, from the public just doing what you're doing, honestly. But, I hope you guys get some sponsors, too.
Yeah, it'd be nice to get a couple sponsors, you know. I think we'd put out a few more shows a week than what we do. And it'd be nice to have the time to go out into the field because I can think of about 10 places right now I would want to be out in the field, you know, if we had that time.
Really excellent locations where there's a lot of activity happening right now. And some of this has been communicated to us privately, so, you know, it'd be very exciting to get to these places. And, you know, it's kind of tough to have, you know, be tied to jobs and things like that, where if we can replace that, you know, through sponsorship. And we should probably mention, too, that we've made the jump, or we're beginning to make the jump from podcasts to FM radio.
You know, I saw that.
Right, we're on KXAX in Houston, so we're hoping that other stations around the country take an interest and pick us up also.
Yeah, I saw that, honestly. I saw that the radio station in Texas, perhaps?
Right.
Wasn't it? Yeah, it was a radio station in Texas started picking you guys up. I saw that. That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, so hopefully more to come.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you ever make it on our way, you know, I mean, Pennsylvania, a lot of the hot spot is, you know, that people popularly know about is more of the western side of the state near Pittsburgh and that Ohio border, obviously right there by Salt Fork. But let me tell you, down here where I am, I'm in the middle of the state, all the way at the bottom on the line. I mean, I am literally almost on the state line. I mean, the Gettysburg Address, honestly, is 20 minutes down the road east of me. Right here bordering West Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania. These, I mean, if you go through, any would-be person that's interested, if they just do enough digging, you know, and certain sites and things, they'll see lots of reports in these bordering counties that are all on from the middle to the western side of Pennsylvania that border into Virginia or West Virginia as well as Maryland, and then go into southern western parts of Ohio. I mean, it's really, and if you look on a map, I mean, honestly, the Appalachian Trail, you know, it's running right through there. And like I said, I grew up in Florida, you know, so coming up here to these mountains, I mean, this is much different for me. You know, I know down there they got a lot going on with their skunk apes and things like that, and I think that's great, you know, I really do. But let me tell you what, up here, they got some big ones. They got some real big ones. I haven't seen them. I mean, there's stories of bow hunters and all kinds of guys right around here that have had some hellacious encounters, you know. Hopefully, you know, if you want me to, I can pass some information of you guys on, and if you guys, you know, would so choose to talk with them, you know, I'm sure they would love to speak with you guys as well. You know, and some of these guys, like I say, they're hunters. They were hunting all their life. You're not going to tell these guys there's something in the woods that they don't know about. You know, they're simple. Well, I don't want to say simple, but I just meant, you know, down home, you know, red-blooded Americans. They don't put up with crap. And when they run into something like this, they literally don't know what to do, and they do not go back in the woods. They sell off all their hunting gear. You know, they don't care. You know, when they encounter this.
We're very interested in hearing from any hunters and loggers. Something we talked about doing a show about was loggers, so we'd really like to hear from both hunters and loggers. Okay, sure. That's no problem. I mean, there's lots of logging that goes on in this area, too. I don't know that it's as much as perhaps what you guys have experienced out west or what have you, but, I mean, you can see huge things that are fenced off from where they just cut down a bunch of stuff and they're letting the new growth go. And there's active logging going on up here, you know, where logging roads and the whole thing that run all over the whole Michaud Forest. I mean, if you guys get the chance, honestly, please Google Earth it, research it, whatever. The Michaud Forest right here in Pennsylvania between Chambersburg and Gettysburg. It's full. It is full of this stuff. I think the picture's still unfolding everywhere. You know, we don't exactly have all the stories. You know, probably the way it's always been, about 1 out of every 10 stories actually makes it to public knowledge. So there's a lot more out there that we don't know, and we don't know the full picture by a long shot. Well, I'll tell you what, I certainly didn't. All right, gentlemen. Well, I think I'm gonna toddle off and get back inside. I've been standing in the garage all this time, and like I said, I'm from Florida, so my fingers are frozen right now.
Hey, thank you again, Jeff, and I wanted to thank you for coming on and listening to the show as much as you do. We sure appreciate all of that, and we'll definitely be following up with you in the future to see if anything new has happened. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was going to say I'll definitely be emailing Will, and I'll definitely be following you guys. So, you know, please, I look forward to hearing from you guys and sharing information. All right. Thanks so much, Jeff. Hey, no problem. Have a great night. Hey, you too. That was a good account. That was a really good account. You know, it's I know on past shows where, you know, I've asked, is it like a lion's roar? And everyone said, well, not quite like a lion's roar, you know, because that's what I had heard. I know Jeff had sent me messages on Facebook saying, no, exactly, it's a lion's roar. I would say it's quite the eye-opener as far as the situation he was in, and you never know. At best, I think Sasquatch is going to use you as a mop, and it's going to clean the house. I mean,
yeah,
I hate
you
to
know,
say
you get in those situations where you're in the wrong place, and maybe they were hunting. I mean, who knows what they were doing? And obviously, there was more than one. And they probably got ticked off that they were there. They happened to be just in the wrong spot, and that was a warning to get the hell out of here.
Well, his story made me think that maybe the Sasquatches were a little bit thrown off by the wood knocking and thought it was maybe one of their own. And the roaring was, hey, I'm pissed off now. Kind of like you guys double-crossed us. That's not exactly what was on. That was my impression of the story anyway.
And something interesting about him, his account also, that's different than the others we've had, and we've talked to people who just had, you know, encounters like ours. This guy was somebody who was out, you know, like a lot of folks are that are interested in the subject. They want to go out and see one. It's sort of a message to all the rest of them out there, maybe, you know, folks listening that want to go see a Sasquatch and you go out and look in the woods occasionally. You know, this is what can happen. It's different than what everybody thinks it is. And it's one of those, you know, that maybe you really don't want what you wish for.
You're right. That's why they say, you know, be careful what you wish for, because you might